And we're live. Welcome, everybody. Happy Thursday. We welcome you to our 10th edition. We're double digits now, 10th edition of What Keeps You Up at Night? Entrepreneurship During Challenging Times. Today, we have an extended 60-minute episode because our good friends at Spring Activator and Ippel reached out to me a couple weeks ago and said, hey, let's collaborate. That's what we like to do here. It's all about partnerships. So today we have our social impact edition here. So we're excited for this. So we have three fabulous guests and we have three amazing co-hosts today. So it's all about three today. So bear with me a sec. I'm going to share my screen on a bit of an intro here to let you all know what is going on. All right. You can all see that. And we always like to start out with this one here to inspire us here. So how's everybody doing? Everybody hanging in there? You know, during these COVID times, as we're still sheltering in place, but we're slowly increasing our bubble size. Hopefully everybody's still being safe and still doing all the things we need to do to make sure that we can get back to whether it's a new normal. I know Keith's been talking a lot about that. As we come out the other side here and we reshape and reimagine what everything will be during these COVID times and afterwards. All right, so with Startup Vancouver, of which I am the community leader of, we are one of over 40 chapters of Startup Canada across the country, which is the voice for the over 3 million entrepreneurs in this great country of ours. Best way to engage with us, if you're an entrepreneur or an organization with all the things that we do here locally, regionally, and nationally, is through social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And also, we now have our freshly minted YouTube channel, and we post every single episode that we record, including the one that we're doing today that we'll record in a day or two, or sorry, post in a day or two. So please go there, subscribe to the channel, and you can see all the great things that our previous episodes and guests have had to offer to our innovation ecosystem. So just want to rewind the tape a little bit here. 2 nights ago, we had our first reboot of our Van Startup Stories, which was a very popular in-venue speaker event, which celebrates a different underrepresented entrepreneurship group in our communities. And we had our first virtual event, and it was very, very impactful and very, very popular. And we're going to start doing this once a month. And I know, in Keith, I'm not going to promise anything yet, but we've been in conversation that we're looking in the next month or two to do a celebrating social impact entrepreneurs. Along with the months to come, we're looking to celebrate Indigenous entrepreneurs, and I'm in the works and conversations, and hopefully we'll do this next month. I'm going to put this out there, celebrating Black entrepreneurs with the connectivity we have not only across Canada, but also in the United States. So stay tuned to that, because these are very interesting times and times of change. I know, Miriam, you're going to speak a little bit about that later, as far as the impact and through a bit of the lens that you're seeing things through. So yes, stay tuned for that. Once again, we want this to be an interactive conversation. So everybody that's attending today, whether it's on Zoom or also on Facebook Live, put your questions out there while we're talking to our guests. If you have any questions, we can read them for you, or we can even open up the mic if you are comfortable with that also. So once again, we want to make this as interactive as possible here and as engaging with this. So today we have three guests. We have Suzanne Siemens, we have Enno Tamm, and also Valerie Song, who was a guest of ours on our very first episode. But today the conversation with Val is going to be a bit different, and we're going to focus on, surprise, surprise, social impact and how that affects all the good things that they're doing at Ava Technologies. Want to quickly mention also, we do have a charitable partner that we are very passionate about supporting, and that is jack.org. And they are a youth mental health advocacy group that is engaged in every single province and territory. And we have, I think today we had 4 individuals that did donate. to that as an option. So as I do at the end of every single show, whether you like it or not, I will be singing a little shout out to each one of them.
We are very passionate about
there we go. So as I mentioned, Miriam Mobini is my wonderful co-host on Thursdays. Reza V is our co-host on Tuesdays, and he is in the background today that's helping us out. So with that, I do want to turn it over to Keith Ippel. And I've known Keith for many years now. I consider him a good friend and unbelievable and inspirational and impactful individual of what he does. I look at Keith really to inspire and inform the things and shape the things that I do as a role model. And I want to stop sharing here for a second, and I want to give Keith a couple of minutes to actually tell us about the great things that Spring has done and is doing, and then he can segue that right into his conversation with Suzanne. So let me stop sharing here, and Keith, take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And just welcome everybody who's on this session, both on Zoom as well as on Facebook Live. Thanks for joining us, and excited to have you here. Colin, again, thanks just for your tireless work of supporting entrepreneurship and impact here in Vancouver, and by extension across Canada through Startup Vancouver. So yeah, really excited to be here. For those who don't know Spring, we exist to change the world through entrepreneurship. And so we love to work with entrepreneurs in incubation, acceleration, and fundraising. We also do a fair amount of investor training. And over the last couple of years, we've worked in about 40 communities around the world, helping to develop ecosystems and incubators and accelerators and entrepreneurs in those places. It's been pretty amazing. Yeah, a little shameless plug for one of the things that we are working on right now. We actually just announced today that we launched the Business Resilience Program with the City of Richmond. I just put the link in the chat here on Zoom, and we could probably get it up on Facebook too. But City of Richmond focused on supporting entrepreneurs through this crisis, and really trying to bring the right sort of tools and training and resources to that. We have the good fortune of working with them on that. We're also with the Resilience Program in Campbell River, BC, and actually we'll be spreading that across the province over the course of the summer. So really excited about that. And yeah, I think without further ado, what I'd love to do is I'd love to kick things off. I have the very good fortune of having the next about 15 minutes or so with Suzanne Siemens from Ippel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just start off, Suzanne, by handing it over to you so you can actually just introduce yourself and your company. And then what we can do is dig into the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Keith. And thank you, Colin, also for inviting me. So my name is Suzanne Siemens, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ippel. And I'm here today grateful to acknowledge that I'm operating and living on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I live in North Vancouver, where the Tsleil-Waututh Nations properties are. And yeah, Ippel is a company that's based here in Vancouver. We were formerly known as LunaPads. That might be more familiar to many folks who know of our brand. We are manufactured that's based here in Vancouver, and we specialize in sustainable alternatives to disposable menstrual products. And we do that through our line of washable cloth pads, period underwear, and menstrual cups. And so we're primarily a direct-to-consumer brand, but you can find our products in addition to online, also in stores, in hundreds of stores, primarily across Canada, stores like London Drugs and Whole Foods. And for those of you wondering about the name change, we chose the name Ippel and the URL ippel.com, just basically as a declaration to say that we want to be the best place in the world for someone to have their period by offering just the most products that meet the needs of every body and anyone who has a period. We're also really proud to be one of the top 10% B corporations in the world. And we're just best known for our commitment to social justice, gender inclusion, and sustainability. So that's just a really quick background about who we are. And yeah, and how we're faring during COVID is just been a real journey for us.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, Suzanne. And thanks for that introduction. As you said, I think the LunaPads name has been a brand that has been growing, over the years. But really excited about that brand change. And if we get a chance in these next few minutes, we'll dive in on that. But, what I'd love to do is just start off, you just mentioned COVID, and with COVID has come a recession. And so, just would love to hear about, when the lockdown started and everything started to happen.
Mm-hmm.
How did, you and the team react when this all started? And what was that conversation like for you as the leader of the organization?
Well, what was somewhat unique in our situation was that the day that we rebranded, which was, I think, March the 11th or 12th, was the same day that the WHO declared a global pandemic. And so the reaction for us was, oh, everything that we planned this week has really gone sideways. And we had a lot of really great media lined up to announce the rebrand, and all of those media ties kind of fell silent and said, we're not going to talk about the rebrand right now. And we totally understand. So for us, the team was really just regrouping how we were going to move forward in terms of our messaging and how we were going to be in the world as a brand and as a new brand. So a lot of focus was on talking about, being respectful of what's happening in the world, and making sure that our marketing messages was not being pushy, and just being really sensitive to what's happening. And then at the same time, the team obviously had to really come together and figure out how we're going to operate. What do we need to do in terms of safety protocols? Are people coming into the office anymore? And if they are, what are the protocols? So just the standard of what everyone else was doing. The other interesting flavor during that week of lockdown was that I was in Toronto that week with Valerie, actually. And we were at a conference, and it turned out that at that conference was the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And Val and I were part of a cohort of entrepreneurs who actually got to meet him and shake his hand. And then we go home a couple of days later, watch the news, and learn that his wife, Sophie, had COVID. So we immediately actually went into quarantine because we knew that that was a potential risk. So essentially that week I went straight home, and I haven't been to the office and seen the team essentially since that week that we left for Toronto. So it's been a really interesting, rapid adjustment, but I just want to acknowledge that the team really came through in terms of stepping up and figuring out what the protocols would be, and really adjusting our marketing and messaging at a time where we had some major plans, and we just had to make those adjustments and do it as carefully and respectfully as we could, while also trying to figure out like cash flow and survival, and what benefits are out there to support us, and those kinds of things. So just the usual scrambling.
Yeah. And who, like, in that process where you said, like, talking about scrambling, cash flow, survival, adaptation, who did you and the team call on for help? Like either for advice or support or tools? Like, where did you guys go in that process?
We just tapped into our network. We tapped into the CEO network. We tapped into, I know Spring had a few resources that they were sharing, just a lot of emails and networks and Slack channels. I'm part of a number of Slack groups that have just been posting all sorts of resources. So that just goes to the power of like network resources, network communities, I should say, and relying on them. And, at times just emails from government groups that we're a part of, and consultancy agencies that we work with. So everyone was really being generous and sharing whatever information was out there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Now, you guys actually went above and beyond, and you started producing masks, which is, incredible. And I think very, I think for me anyways, very incredibly inspiring, but it can be disruptive to the business.
Yeah.
Why did you guys step into it? How did you consider the trade-offs, and where do you think that has kind of placed the team going forward? Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question, because it wasn't actually an easy decision it was easy decision in terms of when we were asked. So the backstory is really by the second week of March, everyone was really trying to figure out how they were going to function. And we were contacted by a good colleague of ours who is the director of a social service agency. And She has a team that's providing services to youth who are experiencing homelessness or just any at-risk type of crisis, and said, we're going to be short of PPE. We don't want to take away from the supply from the medical community. Can you make cloth masks? And if you recall, at that time in early March, cloth masks were not a favorable idea. There were a lot of, including our health officials, saying, do not wear them. They're not recommended. And so we went through a pretty rigorous process of trying to evaluate, should we do this? And we came to the conclusion, we need to do this because we need to offer whatever help and support we can. And so the way we figured it out is, let's make them, but let's make sure that the users have full detailed instructions on their use and care, so that the risk of using them is lowered by taking care of how you wear them and clean them and touch them. So in that regard, we felt fine about it. And that was really a pilot, I guess you would say, a minimal viable product, an MVP of like, what is it like to maybe make cloth masks? And so we went to our production team and said, we know you've closed down for COVID, but would you be willing to reopen and make 200 masks for us? And they looked at their safety kind of situation and said, yeah, we can do this. We can, figure out ways to safely make them and do the safe social distancing. And so with 200 masks, we distributed them and realized, you know what, there's more than 200 masks that need to get out there. And so we learned about a group called Downtown Eastside Response, which is organized by a number of local folks who realized that if COVID broke out in the downtown east side, that would be horrifically harmful to that community. And so we asked them, would you like some donations of cloth masks? And they said, absolutely, send us what you can. So that inspired us to start a GoFundMe campaign. And really within a few weeks, thanks to the generosity of the community, we raised $15,000 so that we could make 2,500 masks to distribute to the downtown east side. And so that was sort of the mechanics of it. But when you ask about the team, it's a really good question because it is disruptive. Like, cloth masks are not things that we make normally. And so we had to make adjustments to our production and ask people to change what they're working on and make, decisions on like how we're going to offer this and are we going to put it on the website. And we had a really interesting conversation about like, why are we doing this? And we kind of went back to our roots and our values, that we're doing this because we are a company that's based on values of supporting our community. And if we can be of support to the community, then we will do it in a way that makes financial sense and also isn't taxing on the resources of the team. So we figured out a way to do it, and it was a kind of good way to rally everyone together to do something that sometimes you can feel a little helpless when there's a pandemic or when there's a crisis, and everyone was able to rally together and say, this is something good that we can do together. Yeah. So it was just an interesting kind of process to go through about, should we do it and why are we doing it? And yes, we're doing it, and we're doing a good job of it.
Cool. And what do you think and by the way, really appreciate you sharing that. As you kind of look at how you and the team have kind of responded to the crisis, and now that the lockdown is starting to lift, I can see you're in the office. What lessons would you share with some of the fellow entrepreneurs on this live session about how you and the team have responded to the crisis and what you're planning on doing through the rest of the recession?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, I'm super grateful that we've been able to manage through this pandemic in a pretty successful way. And, we haven't had any major transitions in terms of staffing, and, people are still working, and being an online business has been a privilege for us to be able to keep functioning. And what we've learned is that to be successful during a crisis and then to be successful going out of a crisis, you're really relying on your foundation of being a good business from the outset, having a great team, having great products, and having the right kind of messaging to make sure that your customers remember your brand throughout the process and remember what you stand for. And when you stand on your values of being good to the community, having great products, being there for them when you need them, not centering yourself in the conversation, but centering what people need, whether it's your staff, what they need, whether it's what the community needs, making donations to groups that need it at a time when they are relying on you to step forward because you can and because you're in a leadership position. That's sort of what we did during the crisis and what we'll do going forward, so that I'm hopeful that people will just remember how you behaved during that pandemic and how you move going forward. And the same can be said for what's happening with Black Lives Matter, and being really considerate about what you're doing and what you're standing up for. And, you know, we thought very carefully about that over the past week. And just this morning, we finally issued a statement about what we're doing and how we're helping and how we know we can do better. And I think that's what people should remember about your brand going forward, and not that you want to center yourself, but you want to show that you're there in solidarity.
Well said. Well said. Well, I'd love to, Colin, maybe see if either there's questions from yourself, the rest of the panel, as well as from the audience. And so, Colin, just over to you. Oh, and you have to come off mute.
Wow, what a rookie move there. You think I'd be better at that by now. There we go. Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Suzanne, for that. Reza, I know you're on here and you've been in the background. Are there any questions for attendees, from attendees, either on Zoom or on Facebook Live? And if not, I know I have some questions, and I'm sure Miriam might have some also. And Reza, you're on mute too, my friend.
We don't see any questions at this point, but I just wanted to say how appreciative I am of, you know, how you have stepped up for the community, and especially for the downtown East Side community, and show compassion and empathy, and how you've been giving. So it's an honor to be here with you and learn more about what you're doing.
Thanks, Miriam.
Colin, do you have any question at this point?
I do. I guess the one question, the fact that you are a B Corp, just like Spring is, how have you found that's helped inform what you do? I know you touched on this already as far as your why and your purpose, and what you surround yourself with in good times and in challenging times. But have you found going through the process of getting registered as a B Corp, is that kind of help kind of strengthen those muscles or sharpen your knife, if you will, now that these challenging times have hit?
What I really appreciate about the B Corp community is going back to what Keith said about being a community and accessing resources, and being able to tap into that group to say, you know, I need help on some particular topic, and can somebody be of support there? And in terms of sharpening the pencil, you know, because B Corp has an actual measurement process where you have to score to make sure that you A, qualify, and B, to actually excel and actually become one of the top B Corps, you're always looking for ways to do better. And they give you tools to say, here's some things that you could do to make your company even better. You know, there's a number of things that they give you lists of what to do. And so it kind of strengthens those muscles, because you remember, like, what can we do? How can we keep doing better? And so, yes, I would say that it keeps you sharp and makes you accountable and keeps you transparent. And, you know, when you go out there and start saying, well, you know, these are our values, you have to live up to them. And then people start holding you to account and actually pushing you even harder, which can get a little challenging, because as much as you're trying to do, you have to remember also, or folks don't necessarily remember, like, the size of your business and what you can accomplish. And so sometimes we have to kind of say, well, we're doing the best that we can, and thank you, we'll take your idea under consideration, and we'll keep trying to do better.
Great. Thank you for that. Unless someone else has one, I have one more question for Suzanne as a follow-up to that. All right. I'll just go for that. And we ask this quite often to our guests. So you personally, Suzanne, and also with the team, because of course we touched on with the work that we do with jack.org as far as mental health advocacy, not just for youth, but also for entrepreneurs. And we've talked about this and have held events for mental health awareness for entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. How are you coping? What do you do, even pre-COVID and also now, yourself and the team, to make sure that you find that balance so that your physical and mental health avoids burnout, anxiety, depression, all those other things that sadly it happens at a much higher rate in entrepreneurship? So can you kind of talk to that for a second?
Yeah, my favorite thing to do is just to get out in nature, and I'm fortunate to live close to some trails where I go out running, walking, hiking. I have a recently new puppy, and so she gets us out the door and keeps us active. And I would also just say reaching out to people. Like I know that people are not coming into the office, but I do call people and call the team and call friends and just make time to really connect, because it can be pretty isolating during these times. So those are my top two things.
Stuff. Well, thank you for that. And again, Keith, thank you for that interview. I'm always learning interview skills from you too. You're great at it, and I appreciate that. So let's quickly move over to Miriam and Eric. So Miriam, I'm going to hand it over to you to have a conversation with our next guest, Eric and Tamm.
Thanks, Colin. I would like to welcome Eric and Tamm, the man who has been able to give face to our faceless food system. He's an award-winning author, journalist, activist, adventurer with more than 24 years experience in media and nonprofit sector. You're now a CEO of a social impact company called ThisFish, and I believe the fishermen like to call it the Facebook for fishermen, which connects the harvesters to consumers. And I love the storytelling aspect of your platform. I believe that I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about ThisFish and when you launched it and when the beta launched. And I believe that tell us a little bit about the, this it's just a seafood traceability that you would like to call it faceability instead of traceability. And can you tell us why and what problems did you detect in the seafood supply chain back in 2009 that brought on this creation of ThisFish?
Great, thanks. Yeah, so we're a software company based here in Vancouver, and we're building software for seafood traceability, helping to make our seafood supply chains more trusted and transparent. And seafood is the most globally traded protein on Earth. It's a very globalized industry. But those supply chains are often extremely opaque. And it's an ancient industry, actually. Fishing is probably the last vestige of our hunter-gatherer society. So most of the industry is still on paper. So it's really our mission to help to digitize the industry, bring it into the 21st century, and by doing so, enable it to be more transparent as data can be shared, right through to consumers. We have a bit of a unique genesis as a company because we actually spun out of an environmental nonprofit called EcoTrust Canada, based here in Vancouver. So a lot of our initial work as a company, actually, in terms of incubating our ideas, looking at the challenges in global seafood, was done as part of a nonprofit. And then in 2017, we realized that we had developed technology that could be commercialized. So we spun the nonprofit, or the program, I should say, out of the nonprofit into a for-profit company. Of course, EcoTrust remains one of our largest shareholders, but we also went out to the broader community to impact and angel investors. And we're sort of in that way, I guess, a traditional software company. Your question about work around faceability and trying to put a face on the food, it is, it was and has been pretty challenging. We were, I would say, one of the first companies in the world to really try to put the story of the fishermen onto products back in 2009. And one of the biggest problems we found is that actually, by and large, most of the data in the industry, especially in the manufacturers, the seafood processors, is all on paper. Many of them struggled with basic traceability. So as a result of that, we actually built software that's really focused actually on the manufacturing of seafood, because that's kind of like the hub in the supply chain. So our theory of change is that by helping the seafood manufacturers digitize all their production and the traceability data, it'll have spillover effects in the rest of the supply chain. So that's what we're focusing on now. Although we do still have a traceability platform that allows consumers to trace where their products come from. And generally, what we find is transparency breeds trust. There's lots of evidence in that, in consumer research and in our own sort of experience dealing with seafood companies.
Actually, that's the next thing I wanted to bring up is behavior change. As a behavior designer myself, I'm really curious about how your platform has actually helped to bring about positive behavior change, and what have you noticed as a result of it? So you mentioned transparency, and are there any other, what else have you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges, though, early on in terms of behavior change is there wasn't a lot of incentives for some of the middle supply chain actors to become more transparent. In fact, a lot of the traceability systems out there was really about dumping on more costs onto the seafood processors and stuff. So, you know, in terms of behavior change, what we're trying to do now is actually build commercial value in that data, make it valuable for the companies, so that will incentivize them to, you know, digitize their data and to share their data. Because, you know, historically, traceability, chain of custody, all of these things have just been sort of a cost center for the companies. But by making the data more valuable to them, allowing them to, like, you know, in the manufacturing process, have dashboards and be able to see how efficient the operations are, you know, that's encouraging them to you know, to digitize their data. So, you know, the behavior change is really about incentives and really kind of building the commercial incentives there.
And how are you? How are you and your the system that is supporting the local restaurants and chefs?
Yeah, I mean, we're a step removed from the restaurants and chefs. I mean, most of our software is, you know, operating at the manufacturer level. Some of them are selling directly to consumers. So, for instance, you know, we have one small processing company in Washington State. You know, they lost all their retail, so they quickly pivoted to direct to consumer, and they've been using our system kind of to help manage that data. Because if you go from wholesale to direct to consumer, you're now dealing with a lot more data, and it's very difficult to manage that on paper. And that's why most, you know, direct to consumer food companies have some sort of software platform behind them.
Thank you. And I'm wondering how COVID has impacted your business.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we're a global company. We have team members in Latin America and Peru and Mexico and Southeast Asia and Thailand and the Philippines. So actually in February, I was in the Philippines, I was in Thailand, I was in Ecuador, flew through Taipei. So, you know, I kind of saw firsthand in February sort of, you know, what was happening in Asia. We all work remotely, so it hasn't had a big impact, you know, on our workflow. We also, you know, have a long sales cycle, right? Because we're selling enterprise software. So there weren't that many immediate impacts. However, you know, there's definitely long-term impacts. Like we have a very large factory that we're configuring the software for in Ecuador. We need to get on the ground there, but we have to keep delaying our trips to Ecuador just because of all the, you know, the restrictions. So that's definitely impacted our ability to actually deliver kind of, you know, on the ground installations. And then generally speaking, you know, the poor economic situation ahead, you know, is definitely going to impact sales. So, you know, we went from a growth mentality in 2020 to one of upselling existing customers on new features and pouring more time and energy into R&D, and especially, you know, shred eligible R&D, the tax credit, so we can, you know, kind of, and we didn't have that scheduled, but, you know, we've slowed down a little bit, so we're pouring more energy into our product development.
I'm wondering what guides your decisions. You've been doing so much ever since you were little, like you've done a lot, and I'm wondering what pulls you towards the events in your life and directs you that, okay, this is what I'm going to do next.
I guess I've always been a bit of an innovator. I've always liked trying something new. I also consider myself a lifelong learner. So, you know, I think it was spring back in 2016. I think I took some of my first true entrepreneur courses with Spring, and Keith has been a mentor ever since. So, you know, that really drives me. Like right now, it's all about machine learning. Our software is generating enormous volumes of data, and now we're diving deep, the whole team, and especially me. And I'm not a software programmer. I'm actually born and raised in a commercial fishing industry family from Vancouver Island. So I have to learn enough to be able to manage, machine learning projects and talk with our developers about it. So that really kind of keeps me going. It's just the learning.
And actually, you're talking about data, and I'm wondering how do you validate the data that is coming into your system?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the best way to validate the data is just the volume. There's just so much data that, and there's so many operators in the factory entering data that you can do a lot just by cross-checking. And every time data is inputted into our system, it's time-stamped and stamped with the user. And then just through large volumes of data, actually machine learning potentially could be used to help validate whether things are erroneous or data outliers, or even, have been manipulated for malicious reasons,
And I see that you attended Techstars two years ago. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with Techstars as well?
Yeah, so we were part of Techstars Sustainability. So it was actually done in partnership with the Nature Conservancy. So as a part of that, actually the Nature Conservancy through Techstars Sustainability is also one of our investors. So we have we're kind of unique that we have now two environmental groups on our cap table as a company. It was great. I mean, it was wonderful getting to know some of the other entrepreneurs. I think one of my favorite weekly programs of Techstars was just the CEOs would get together in a confidential setting and just talk about challenges. I mean, there was something like incredibly comforting knowing that other people are feeling your pain. So
you're not the only one going through it. It's always nice to know.
Exactly. So that was a great part of the program. Just the passion of people, and then the network. I mean, Techstars has been very active actually during the whole COVID crisis, and even before, constantly reaching out. You don't have to reach out to them, because I feel like they're constantly reaching out to you. They're sending us, as a company, they're sending us potential investors or tips, bringing us together in Zoom meetings to talk about challenges and that sort of stuff. So overall, it's been a great experience.
I have one more question for you, and then we're going to take a question from the audience. I'm wondering what your top 3 favorite books are.
Top 3 favorite books. Oh, geez. Probably, I would say maybe The Grapes of Wrath is probably one of my top books. I'm quite influenced by John Steinbeck. I'm a big nonfiction reader. So probably The Professor and the Madman, about the making of the Oxford English Dictionary. And what else? I'm just looking all these books back there. I'll leave it at that. I'm just trying to think. I've got too many going through my head right now. So.
Oh, one more. Who inspires you?
In terms of writers?
Could be writers, just in general too. At least during this time, who's inspired you?
I think, in general, I'm inspired by the underdog, I would say, I mean, that's probably what attracted me to a lot of Steinbeck's writing, is he's always kind of writing about the down and out,
Thank you. And a question from the audience, wondering, do you find your client sensitive over data privacy, and how do you overcome such a hesitant when it comes to their data?
Yeah, absolutely. The seafood industry historically has a culture of secrecy. There are changes afoot. So looking for the early adopters, looking for the individuals in the industry that want to see change, seeking them out, because they're the leaders that, the rest of the industry will follow. And then, also, we're from the seafood industry. So we go into our meetings, with a lot of empathy, understanding why they would be concerned and trying to alleviate those concerns. Like some companies are like, well, our data's in the cloud, somebody's going to hack it. And I'm like, there's a lot of commercial data out in the cloud, personal information, credit card numbers. Like hackers in China or Russia are probably not going to go over your canned tuna production data. It's not much valuable. They typically laugh and they kind of get, realize that, they don't really have huge privacy issues when it comes to, worrying about hacking of their data. But it is something that comes up quite regularly.
Thank you. Reza, there's one more question. It says, if you have global strategy to survive this situation, COVID-19, could you share it, please?
A global strategy. Well, I mean, the first thing was we cut back our expenses and, kind of aligned our team so that we have a fairly long runway. We started looking at upselling our existing customers so that even if we don't have any new, any new revenue or new customers in the next 10 to 12 months, I think we still have a survival strategy. But obviously, any company needs to have new customers. The COVID continues to be an issue, especially because some countries like Canada and Thailand and other Taiwan are doing well at limiting and flattening the curve, while others are not doing so well. So, it continued to be a challenge for us for sure. And we may have to pivot our go-to-market strategy based on where COVID is. Latin America, Southeast Asia are our two target markets. But as we know, Peru, Chile, and Ecuador are not doing so well. So, we will have to look, in a month or two. Do we pivot, do a lot more activity in our own market in British Columbia and Canada and places like Taiwan, Thailand, where, COVID has sort of been flattened.
And I know one of the challenges that fishermen have faced during this time has been, having all the employees to pack all the goods and to bring it to market because you can't have that many people in one space. And so that's very difficult. And I'm not sure where they're at right now with that.
Yeah, I think that early on, that was the scariest part for me. So we work with a lot of primary producers, in the Philippines, Ecuador, some of the biggest, tuna producing companies in the Americas, and just watching to see when if their factories were going to close. Because if their factories closed, I could tell you we would have bigger issues than COVID, and that is, food security.
Yeah.
We're a very globalized, food system. And so I was watching that quite closely. And most of our factories stayed in operation. Some of them had to reduce their output. Like one of our factories had 2,500 workers, and some workers decided not to come into work. So they were down to about a third of capacity at one point. So it was kind of interesting to have, and then the same in the Philippines. I could see the food producers in the Philippines and Thailand. So it was kind of interesting having a front row seat on food security. And I was telling my friends, I'll tell you when the canneries stopped producing cans, because there weren't any canned tuna on the shelves in here in Vancouver for a while, because everybody was hoarding them and buying them. So that actually had me quite nervous very early on. But thankfully, the worst didn't come about. So.
Yeah, and actually that's an opportunity for innovation, right? How we're going to solve that, right?
Yeah. A lot, shorter supply chains, more domestic food security is certainly the answer.
Exactly. Thank you so much. This has been great, and now I'm going to pass it on to Colin. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, and thank you, Miriam. Actually, we do have time for one more question. Keith, I have a question, but Keith, if you have a question for Eric, well, now's the time, my friend.
No, I'd love to have you dive in. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. No, that sounds great. All right. So actually, the quick question for you, Eric, that I had is for all the entrepreneurs that are out there. And of course, we have a lot of students that are entrepreneurs and programs, a lot of people at that ideation stage, and a lot of people have been using the P word. Not the one that Suzanne uses, but the P word that is pivot. And I always look at pivot in some ways, I don't want to be too harsh on it, as, what we've done doesn't work anymore. We have to do something completely different. So can you talk about how you've retargeted your resources or recalibrated a little bit, or one or two things that you could suggest for entrepreneurs that are out there watching as a bit of advice? Maybe one or two things very quickly here is how they can take a deep breath and kind of see their way through in whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah, so we've had, I would say as a company, two fundamental pivots. When we initially had our traceability platform, we realized it wasn't producing as much value for our customers as we wanted. So our pivot was to look at software that helps to generate production data and digitize the factories. Now that these factories have a lot of data. Again, we are focused, on the value the company is getting from our software, and recognize, what, now that they have a lot of data, how do we get them more data? So now our pivot is into machine learning. And, my vision for the company, a year and a half from now, we've just started our machine learning research and application development, is we'll be an AI company. So, but it's all of our pivots have really been focused around the value of the customer, alleviating those customer pain points, and just be empathetic. Go in with an open mind and listen to your customers,
Great advice there. That is universal during the boom times and also during the crunch times there. Empathy, listening, you can't do enough of that. And that's how you really find out those pain points that you touched on, no matter what your business is. And it sounds like you're refining and evolving more as you go along here, especially as you start to automate and embed even more AI to make yourself even more efficient and speed up to allow you to scale. So thank you for that, Eric. I do appreciate that. So I will switch over to our final guest of today's show, and that is our good friend Valerie Song, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ava Technologies. And Val has, I got to say, Val, you actually were awesome the other day, because 3 minutes, actually 2 minutes before we were going to go live for our Celebrating Women Entrepreneurs speaker event, one of our speakers unfortunately had to bow out. I phoned Val and said, "Are you busy? Can you jump in?" And you did. You got us a deck and boom, it was amazing. So thank you again for that. And you're not sick and tired of us yet, because this is the third time in 4 weeks you've been with us. So I want to sprinkle in different ingredients for our conversation today, Val. So talking about how social impact has informed what you've done. And I do want to start with that first question. Well, before I do that, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll drill down into the good things that you've done with Ava, and then we'll get a couple of stories along your journey.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. It's great to be back. Again, my name is Val. I'm the CEO at Ava, and I'm actually sitting in our offices right now. It's the first time some of our staff have been back in a while, so we're having a little gathering over there. But I'll try to keep the content today a little bit different from what I've talked about before, and I'll lead with more social impact, and I actually can show you some stuff at our office that we're working on as a COVID response. So we'd love to share those two things. But yeah, so I guess I can start answering right away on your first question, if that works with you.
Go for it. Absolutely. Please do.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay. So in terms of social impact and how that has guided a lot of things that we do here at Ava, and for those of you who don't know, we make smart indoor gardening devices that help people thrive and get growing real plants all year round without them dying and without knowing what to do along the way. So we equip you with not only the tools to grow, but also the knowledge through our app. So we coach you through the process so you can become a confident gardener and experience that magic of growing. For social impact, this has been ingrained in everything that we do, from how we design our product to how we run our business. From the product side of things, one really important thing from the get-go was inspiring more people to grow food right at home, especially when you have a time like COVID-19 where food supply, it can be limited and it can be really scary. To be more self-sufficient and to know where that food comes from and have your own supply is really, really great to help you build that baseline confidence and patience during a pandemic like this. And as a result, we've actually seen a huge increase of organic interest in the gardening space. I'm sure you've probably heard of a friend or two that started to pick up gardening just because either they're really bored at home or they want to have more of a fresh supply at home. So social impact in terms of inspiring more people to grow food and get growing, that's been fundamental to our mission, vision, and purpose. The second thing we do is in terms of how we build our product, whether it's packaging, we try to be zero waste wherever we can. So our device boxes, they're actually built to be zero waste. So the cardboard can be removed from the handle and you can recycle all the pieces as necessary. And the paper pulp that we use for our pod pack packaging is actually fully compostable. It's backyard compostable, so you don't have to worry about it mixing into different recycling streams and contaminating the lot. So I think that has been really important to how we develop all of our products, and we try to be 100% compostable and backyard compostable where possible when it comes to our pods, our seeds, and our nutrients. Finally, in terms of social impact for our business, when we do hiring, when we look for people, and when we interview, we really ingrain our values into the interview process. We also actually add in another level to our interviews, which is 16 personalities, or Myers-Briggs, and that really helps us get a good understanding of communication styles, what people value, what motivates them, and how that all comes together to build a powerful team. So I'll lead with that.
Nice. Well, to segue in, to talk more about your team now that you're back in the office, tell us about that experience of coming back into the office. And how big is your team now as you've grown over the last 3 years or so with APA?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting time. We initially thought, again, that we were going to go bankrupt, but we actually had a whole bunch of money come in from the government, which has been amazing. And I'm so grateful to be a Canadian, so grateful to be in this amazing community. We ended up having enough cash and having enough support from the government to be able to hire almost 10 people this summer. So that's been incredible. The team is the largest it's ever been. I think we're going to be around 20 people next week. So that's an exciting period of time. In terms of coming back to the office and transitioning into the office, it's been kind of like a periodic thing. So it wasn't everybody at once. We had people who worked physically on the product. So people who had to assemble packaging, deliver bites, those people who had to be in the office, we came first. And that's been about 2 to 4 weeks already. Some of us even longer. My co-founder and I, we've been here for months, just folding packaging by ourselves. And now we actually have today, for the first time, 2 or 3 more people join us. And then after that, it's mostly being phased in. And we want to be sure, at every phase, we're careful about everybody's, health and monitoring the situation as we go.
Got it. And I have to say, Keith has shown such great thought leadership over the last 3 months as things have hit here to share with people just resources of government subsidies or how you can survive and then thrive and best things to do and best practices. So with that, Val, do you dig a little deeper and tell us what government programs you did take advantage of? Because also there were so many at one time that was a bit overwhelming, whether it's through IRAP and the federal government and provincial, between getting with your landlord and your lease. So can you take a deep breath and just tell us how you did that over a couple of weeks and what you took advantage of, or you unlocked is probably a better word to use, in order to help you survive so that now you can again thrive.
Totally. Yeah, I love that pun. And first and foremost, a real shout out to Keith and the Spring community. They have helped me so much, and Keith personally has helped me so much through the toughest of times. And I think it's a real testament to the Vancouver community to have people like this and like yourself, Colin, who are supporting the community and giving back so much. It really means a lot to us to have all these resources, especially that emotional support that the government or peers might not give you at some points, to really motivate you to keep going and to find answers and results. So thanks. And in terms of resources that we've tapped into from a government perspective, one big thing, so I guess I'll separate it into salary grants, and then other initiatives like tax incentives, and then subsidies. So in terms of salary grants, there are amazing grants out there, especially right now. They have opened up the parameters on what is acceptable to be eligible for a grant. Most of these apply to businesses hiring youth 30 or under. And actually, you can get almost 100% coverage for students who are currently looking for work, either as a co-op or as a student internship. So just kind of going higher level, we've taken advantage of some programs like Eco Canada, which is great for sustainable businesses. There's also Clean Leadership. There's digital tech. So there's CCAN as well. If you're in agri-foods, there's an agri-food specific Get Youth Working, I think it's Youth Employment Skills Grant. There's also non-agri-food Youth Employment Skills Grant. A lot of these are about $10,000 to $20,000, and the coverage is about 75% to 80%. So basically, if you have the 25%, they'll match the rest of the 75%. Until that $15,000 to $20,000 runs out. So that's been great. On top of that, if you are working on SHRED eligible activities, so scientific research and development, you can stack that on top of some of these things. And different programs have different requirements. Some are not stackable, but you can almost get 100% back on technical staff. So we've been really leveraging that kind of system to do our hiring. The second piece is, of course, just the other tax incentives that we have. For SHRED, those of you who have not filed it before, right now is a great time to file. I believe you have up to a year and 6 months after that year that you perform the activities to file for SHRED. And right now they are fast tracking the process and auditing later, which means you're getting that cash up front. We submitted and got our SHRED money in, I think, a week and a half, which was a record because the last time we got it, it took us maybe 8 months because we got audited and did the whole process from when we first submitted to actually getting that cash. So from 8 months to just 1 or 2 weeks, amazing. For those of you who might need some extra cushion between getting SHRED and maybe you haven't done it before and it's taking a little longer, you can also finance that SHRED with different organizations. So you get money up front as well with interest that you have to pay back to the financier. And then finally, there's also subsidies. So wage subsidies. You may have heard of the 75% wage subsidy. For those of you who aren't eligible, there was the IRAP version, which is IAP, Innovation Something Assistance Program, I think it was. And that is the alternative to if you didn't see a decrease in revenue during the COVID period, but you're working on technical work, you could use the IAP program, which we actually just got as well. So yeah, quick highlight into the different grant programs.
Wow, sounds like you're putting on a masterclass of tapping into all of the resources that are put out there. And we want everybody to take advantage of these and at whatever stage, and it depends on where you are within your entrepreneurial and your company growth, you have the chance to access those, both personally and also corporately. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if we have enough time with Reza to source some of the links there and put those in chat for our attendees. But Al, thank you for that. I know we only have a couple minutes left here, but I did see there was one question I haven't seen yet. Perhaps Miriam, you can jump on. Have you seen, or Reza, have you seen that?
That was a question that I've already asked that question, but I have a question about machine learning and AI. And Eric, that you've been focused on that. Is there any funding that you have received, or anyone who, this is open to anyone who would like to contribute funding around machine learning and AI available to Canadian businesses?
Yeah, so I mean, we did get an initial grant from IRAP that allowed us to partner with York University. So, I think IRAP is, your kind of typical place to go. Also, in Canada, we have these superclusters. So there's the Ocean Supercluster based in Halifax and St. John's. So you can, again, put together partnerships with universities and apply to them for quite substantial amount of grants. So we were shortlisted to apply for a large grant focused on our machine learning. So that's what we're working on right now. You think you can partner with universities, I would take a look at the different superclusters in Canada, because it'll provide up to 65% of the funding, and you can get tax credits for the remaining amount of money that you put in. So it's extremely generous program.
Thank you. And thanks, Val. That was really great.
Wonderful. That was. I want to thank all our guests. So we're almost at the bottom of the hour here. So before we sign off, as I always do when people are generous enough to donate, I give everybody a little shout out here. So today will be no exception. So I'm going to do that right now. Nice donation by you. Jack.org says, thank you. You are awesome. Susan Werner, Maid Nakajima, Keith Ippel, and Reza V. Nice donation by you. There we go. I don't know if I'm getting better or worse at that. I will not be the judge of that. So
That's great. Loved it.
Amazing.
So before we go here, Keith, I want you to say a couple of last words, and thank you again for collaborating with this. Thank you, Suzanne and Eric and Val, for joining us. So Keith, if you can say a couple words, and then Miriam, if you can wrap up for us today, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So Colin also does weddings and birthdays. So just reach out. And bar
mitzvahs. Don't forget that.
Yeah, exactly. All joking aside, really appreciate everybody being online on Zoom and on Facebook, being a part of the Startup Vancouver community. As Val said, we're part of an amazing community here, and it just takes work to build it every day. And so glad you guys were part of this and sharing the time with everybody. Special thanks to Suzanne and Eric and Val for being guest speakers today. And Colin and Miriam and Reza for allowing us to be a part of this and hosting an amazing experience. So thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. And Miriam, over to you to close.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Keith and Colin, for holding space for our amazing entrepreneurs here, and Reza as well. And thanks again, Suzanne and Eric and Val. Learned so much from you. And we'd like everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you get to see us every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30. So just come by for, cocktail hours, or just bring your lunch and spend some time with us. Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Everyone.
Bye. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.